Remember to follow us and comment on the show on Twitter at Amnesia.
What the heck just happened? Okay, chill. All right, time. All right, I'll call. Okay, everyone, seriously, settle down. Settle down. My point is this. Did anyone know what she, I got to call, did anyone know what she looked like? I saw black hair. So, you know what, so our question is this. Can anyone figure out who she is? Second one, you sure?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. So, the point is simply this. Relax. Your backpack's next door. All right, so we're good. All right, we're good. Believe it or not, it was planned. All right, that was, now somebody like, that's not fair, you feel violated. All right, so the point of this, all right, the point of this is to look at eyewitness testimony, and is it as accurate as we would think it is? And the answer resoundingly is no. Our memory is not very good. Our memory for details, or episodic memory is not very good, especially when it's strange, especially when it's new. Adrenaline might help freeze a memory when it happens. But if we're so alert, if we're so nervous, if we're so amped up, adrenaline doesn't help us process and think clearly. So we know something happened. She had black hair, she was small and was kind of weird. All right? So we don't really know which one it was. And if you're thinking it was that one, how many of y'all think you're right? All right?
Now I don't know anymore, thanks to you.
I know. So that's really the thing. And you can see why judges and juries oftentimes do what's called sequester a jury, or they tell the witnesses to do their best to discipline their mind to not let interfering information come in. All right. So it was actually, believe it or not, a spoof. It was a joke. Your backpack's fine. It's all good. All right. But the reality is this: if you see something that's traumatic, how much confidence do you have that you'll be able to remember it? And by now we should know, we or anyone else, eyewitness testimony, little shaky. Go ahead.
So even if like multiple eyewitness testimonies corroborate with each other, it still can be inaccurate?
I would say definitely, because I think we know with what we've learned in social psychology, a group does not guarantee good results. I mean, that would be social facilitation if it did, but there's several other group dynamics where people could feed off each other and start to agree with each other. Look at the Solomon Ash stuff. We all have certain schemas of what a criminal looks like. All right, and most of us are not going to think it's going to be a little freshman girl who's going to wig out and have some kind of, I don't know, angsty, Avenged Sevenfold temper tantrum because the world's not fair. I mean, look, police officers are human. They have the exact same schema, they have the same interference, they have the same cognitive problems we have with recalling and retrieving information. And under stress, you know, we'd like to think that people can become acclimated to adrenaline and stress and behave clearly. I'm not sure how accurate that's going to be. All right. Questions on that? All right. Do you want to go get your backpack? Let's move on. Here's what we're looking at. As we kind of start to wrap up memory, long-term memory and things like that, we want to take a look at the idea of the connection, once again, between mind and body. If we can find physical traces of memory, and we can, look, there's brain structures we know are involved in memory. There's chemicals we know are involved with encoding and retrieving memory. Can we create such traces of the chemical, of the physiological event, of the electrical event in a lab? If we can create it and reproduce it, what is that going to mean for memory? Memory no longer becomes this mysterious thing that happens only in our mind. If we can look at what happens to memory on a molecular basis, on a cellular basis, well, look, there's certain things, metabolic processes we can increase. We can increase or decrease serotonin reuptake. We can increase heartbeat. We can increase certain hormones from being released. I think this is actually pretty interesting. Now, this is going to happen in your life, maybe 10, 20, 30, 40 years. You'll literally be able to have a liquid memory or an electrical memory. Maybe we will be able to merge mind and computer. It won't happen for me. You remember the old lady with the crystal ball said, I'll be dead in 2019. I think it was April, she said. All right, so I won't see it. But in your life, what will this, and some of you are like really concerned. All right, but you know, that's nice, that's touchy. But what have we established? Let's not be concerned for other people. It's all about ourselves. So here's the question we have. If you could encode a memory and then copy it, and then retrieve it from another source, what will that mean for schools? What will that mean for studying? What will that mean for disease? What will that mean for individuality? If I want to see someone's life through their eyes, if for eyewitness testimony, we actually want to see what the eyewitness had, saw. I think that's some pretty powerful stuff. Are we ready for it? I think science is screaming down the road asking the question, can we do this? I think they forgot to ask the question, should we do this? But you really will see a merging of mind, computer, and chemistry and be able to boil down memories into molecular or electronic components. We talk about forgetting. A fancy name for forgetting, a real easy name for forgetting is just called decay. Cognitive decay. Use it or lose it. I wouldn't write down the whole definition. The cognitive word for forgetting is decay. I will give anyone here half a dime if you can tell me, all right, what the behavioral word for forgetting is. It starts with an E.
Extinction.
There you go. All right, remind me, I will cut the dime in half. All right, give it to you a little bit later. So check it out. Cognitive word, decay. Behavioral word is extinction. Those are the words for forgetting. Let's talk about a forgetting curve. Ebbinghaus really did a lot of his work, one of the early German psychologists. And he wanted to figure out how much do we forget? How much do we remember? So he tried to make it a science. He tried to graph it numerically, make it empirical. And he found out that a forgetting curve can be, of course, graphically represented by a negative slope. You have percentage of stuff remembered, time here, you're going to have a negative slope. The magic here isn't that, well, duh, the more, more time that goes by, the less you remember. That's easy. The magic here is what kind of independent variables are there? Males, females, hungry, morning, afternoon? What kind of stuff is it? Is it interesting? Is it musical? Is it boring? Is it exciting? So there's a whole bunch of variables that go into a forgetting curve, but we like this because it's starting to make this thing called memory empirical and making it science. Let's talk about recognition versus recall. I think it's pretty easy to understand. Yeah, the vocabulary words, let's not spend too much time on it. Recognition, all you might want to write down is multiple choice questions. The question itself sometimes clues you, gives you a cue, activates your semantic network, or gives you a priming cue that you can start to remember stuff. So recognition is you choose something out of available cues. It's pretty easy. Everyone prefers multiple choice tests versus essay tests. Maybe tomorrow I'll just have the computers here, have the laptops open, you all come in, and I just simply say this. Give me a list of all of the terms you've learned this past unit. Go. Would you like that test? I don't think you would. That's more of a recall idea. Recall means remembering without cues. It's a little bit harder. The example there would be kind of an essay question. But I think that if I were to say something like, well, tell me all the things you've learned in psychology so far. You might get off to a slow start, but once you remember one thing, that'll remind you of something else. That'll remind you of something else. That'll remind you of something else. Kind of like a semantic network we did with the word ice. The more you know, the more you're going to retrieve. All right, so we got recognition and recall. I wouldn't worry too much about interference. You've already copied down the word interference, but ironically, you've kind of forgotten that. And many of you all started to write down the definition a second or third time. I know I phrased it differently, but interference is a cognitive idea. And it just means new information kind of rewrites or screws up old information. Or maybe it means old interference won't let you learn new stuff. How do you keep them straight? You guys look a little bit bored, so why don't I just show you a little bit of porn right now? Like, what? That's not appropriate. I saw your head snap up, didn't I? Mm-hmm. So check it out. Here's a little mnemonic. At a psychology conference a couple years ago, this idea came from a sweet little old lady, and I swear she came with, well, I just teach my children the concept of porn. All right? And everyone's like, what? But I guarantee you, all the psychology teachers stole her idea, so it means proactive interference, old blocks new. Retroactive interference, new blocks old. Let's talk about biological basis of memory. This is really kind of cutting edge stuff. Why do we care about this? Well, because we're in the middle of the biological paradigm. Scientists right now are working with, well, what chemicals are jumping the gaps? What parts of the brain? What hormones? What receptor sites? What can block? What can excite memory? Years ago, if we were to talk about forgetting, it would be the idea that, well, you're not remembering because part of your mind doesn't want to remember because the thing you want to remember is really traumatizing, so you're protecting yourself. We call that repression, straight out of Freudian stuff. In the cognitive paradigm, we say, well, the reason you forget is because some material is blocking other material and your right thoughts are conflicting, and that's kind of squishy. How do we measure thoughts? So we put stuff under a microscope. We put stuff in an MRI. Now we can call it a science. Now we can make it empirical. We need to know the word bidirectionality. When your mind thinks, your brain reacts. When your brain has certain chemical processes, your mind will think certain things. I don't know which one causes which, under which circumstance. But if we're going to talk about why you cannot think, why you cannot remember, which is a cognitive mental event, maybe we should look at the brain. Maybe we should dissect the brain. Maybe we should have a biopsy of the brain. Maybe we should take some spinal fluid and see what's going on chemically. Okay, new memories are linked to two types of changes in the synapses. The first one is, well, you're going to have new synapses. I think for many of you all, the word bidirectionality is the first time you ever heard that. When you heard it once, you wrote it down, but I don't think you processed it. So if you have a new synapse, it's very weak. Because bidirectionality is a new word. You've never heard it. It's tough to hook on to your semantic network. But I wonder if the more you study, the more you process it, the more you think of it, the more you work with it, your new synapse will then become strengthened. So your second change in the brain when you learn something, first you make a new synapse, but then that synapse gets stronger. The dendrite actually comes out, the postsynaptic dendrite reaches out like a little squid tentacle, reaches out to that axon terminal, getting closer and closer and closer. And I think we know what that is. The fancy word is going to be what's called long-term potentiation. Long-term potentiation, and the phrase there means neurons that fire together, wire together. The more you think certain things, the easier it is you can recall them or remember them. All right, so we got that. Let's talk about this picture here. That cute little thing or ugly little thing, sea slug or sea snail, really a primitive creature. All right, worse than a freshman. So this thing is so, it's not right, it's not right. This thing is so primitive, its nervous system is really simple. So why do we care about a simple nervous system? Because its neurons are huge. I don't think you can see them with a naked eye, but you can see that you don't need an electron microscope. For human beings, you need our synapses, and our neurons are so small, synapse is about 4 microns. That's pretty hard. We can't see that with any normal microscope. You need an electron microscope. They're expensive. You need to be really well trained to see a neuron, see a synapse in that condition. This simple creature, its neurons are huge. Its synapses are huge. Very easy to study. So what do? We take this thing and we teach it something. We make it learn. We make it encode, and then we watch it retrieve. How can you teach that? Classical conditioning. You ring a bell and you shock it. And eventually when you ring a bell and you don't shock it and it flinches, you can say learning's happened. Okay, so we can observe the behavior. Now let's observe what happens cellularly. And if we can see what happens neuron to neuron cellularly, what chemicals jump the gap, can we apply that to humans? Yeah. Yeah, we can. Hold on a second. This is interesting because if you don't get something, if you're taking a test tomorrow, what's that word? I don't understand. And you can't remember something, it's not your fault. Your cells did not connect. If your parents, if your teachers try to put pressure on you for not doing well academically, it literally is not your fault. It would be the exact same thing if your parents blaming you for not being able to bench 350 pounds. Because at the end of the day, muscular strength is based on cellular activity. At the end of the day, memory and intelligence and learning are based on cellular activity. It's not your fault if you're not a good student. Do you like this idea? Because we can show this molecularly. We can show this cellularly. What are we talking about? When we talk about where is memory stored or what is memory, we want to think in terms of matter. And I think that's tempting. It's simple to think of memory as a thing, and things have to be in a place. Things have to have mass and volume. I'm not sure that exists for memory because memories might be a thought and thoughts might not exist in time and space. But if they do, where? Are they localized? What localized means is a memory, one memory is in one part of the brain. Or is it distributed? Is it all over the brain? I think scientists are leaning towards the idea it's distributed. So in a second, I'll tell you what, right now you guys are bored, so let's do this. Let's think of something fun. Slam your pens down, quickly. All right. I want you to think of your favorite ice cream, and if you want to go big, if you have ever had, because it's rare, you see it in the cartoons, but it's rare for someone to actually have an ice cream cone with 2 different scoops on top. All right. So I want you to right now, think about it. I want you to tell me, everyone at once, tell me your favorite ice cream flavor. Go.
Chocolate cream.
All right then. I'm glad no one said coffee. Great drink, bad ice cream. You said coffee? Oh. Notice no one's sitting around you. Coincidence? I don't know. So here's the deal. The idea with this is when you think of memory, when you think of the name, the color, the cold, the flavor, what did you remember? And if you remember all of them, I think we know enough from brain science, well, color might be stored in one part of the brain, the name might be stored in another part of the brain, the taste might be stored in another part of the brain. So where is the memory of your favorite ice cream cone stored? Did you think of the ice cream cone, or did you think of the last time you tasted the ice cream cone? I'm suggesting that memory is stored all over the brain because we know that memories are not kind of discrete things. We put this memory here and this memory here. We talked about the idea memories are made of little bits, and as a result, memories are distributed all over the brain. All right, if we had to find a place for procedural memories, it would be the cerebellum. Evidence suggests the cerebellum stores well-practiced physical memories, things we call muscle memory. If you get kicked in the head by Aunt Jenny's mule, or you're walking around and a flying blender just freaking hits you in the head, and you wake up in an emergency or you wake up in a hospital, what's my name? I don't remember anything. Notice you still remember how to talk. You still remember how to be panicked. Those are reflexes and procedures. Let's talk about acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is involved in Alzheimer's. What do I mean? Well, a lack of acetylcholine, maybe similar to the idea that a lack of dopamine is involved in Parkinson's. A lack of acetylcholine is involved in Alzheimer's. If you're writing that down, I double dog dare you to take a different color pen, highlight or circle the A in acetylcholine, and highlight and circle the A in Alzheimer's. Will it help you remember? I don't know. But we're looking for a trick. We're looking for a mnemonic. We're looking for a way to elaborate this new information coming in. Alzheimer's is a mystery. There isn't a lot of progress. A lot of research dollars have been poured into this. They're getting some data points that said if this, then Alzheimer's, but not causal data. We don't know what necessarily caused it. We certainly don't know how to reverse it. Well, we can cause it mice. Imagine the poor mouse, who what we do is we use an antagonist, an acetylcholine antagonist. So therefore we block acetylcholine from jumping the gap, and mice will then demonstrate Alzheimer's-like symptoms. Well, that's easy, because therefore if you use acetylcholine, an antagonist for acetylcholine, you block it from jumping the gap and it can't get in the receptor sites, well, guess what? Why don't we reverse it? Let's make a man-made acetylcholine, flood older folks who are suffering from the disease, and we'll cure it. It doesn't work that way. Right now, it seems to be kind of a one-way process on that. Okay, check out all this stuff you've already written down. Memory needs all part of the brain. Do we know that by now? I wouldn't write it down then. Unless you want to, that's fine. Hippocampus and connect part of the cortex to episodic memories. Say yes. You don't know that. That's the librarian. Amygdala for emotional memories. All right, we should remember what chemical, what hormone cements emotional memories in your brain? Adrenaline. But don't hit. You saw me walking over here, didn't you all? All right, some of you are like, what? Should I remind you all what adrenaline does? No? I can see you're starting to get nervous. All right, then, so are you now classically conditioned when I walk over here, if everyone starts getting ready to flinch? That's a brain. This one said cute. So I hope no one's like, brain. All right, that'll be a little scary. We look at this picture of a brain, and remember that a lot of brain surgery can be and is done while the person's awake. 1940s, a doctor named Wilder Penfield. Dr. Penfield made an accidental discovery, although we might want to be a little skeptical of this. He was doing surgery on patients with extreme epilepsy, and he accidentally tripped into something. A lot of good discoveries are made accidentally. As he was probing around the brain of the patient, she said, "Oh my gosh, I remember that. Oh my gosh, I remember that." And he thought he was on kind of the magical trail to uncovering memories. If you stimulate a certain part of the cortex, a memory will happen. Stimulate a certain part of the cortex, another memory will happen. I think it's a little too good to be true, a little too tempting. Here's the problem with that, though. How can you ethically do this? Anyone here? $10,000. I would like you to participate in psychological, psychiatric research. You need to go under brain surgery. So they're going to cut your skin, shave your head, cut your scalp, all right, have a little flap of scalp out. And they're going to drill, 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 take out a plug of bone, your cortex is exposed, they're going to go through a few membranes. You're going to be awake for it. And they're going to touch electrically certain parts of your cortex and see if you remember certain things. They're not willing to do it for $10,000. You don't feel any pain. That's the worst that can happen in brain surgery. It's not like there could be an infection, they can make a mistake. And the brain surgeon's like, and it has a hiccup or sneezes right when it's touching your brain. That would go bad.
So you were.
But I'm thinking about if you sneeze, and the scalpel jumps, well, that would be pretty bad news. All right, 50,000. 10 million.
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on a second. If you can imagine, if you were to get, now, if you're going to get a sample set, if you're going to get a certain amount of people, 50, 100 people from all walks of life, and you're going to try to figure out where, because it's got to be a representative sample, you got to figure out where memories are stored. That means you're going to have to do a whole bunch of operations on healthy brain for no reason whatsoever except to explore. Do you see the ethical problems of this? Let's talk about amnesia. What was I saying? All right, let's talk about amnesia. We've got a couple things we got to know. The two big ones are retrograde amnesia. Anyone here ever been knocked unconscious and not been able to remember exactly what happened? All right, that's retrograde amnesia. People drink too much, they black out, bam, they got chemically induced amnesia. Okay, so we got several types of amnesia. Retrograde amnesia, it's kind of going backwards. Think of the word retro, we're going backwards to mess up old memory. It's pretty common. It's pretty common. I would bet most people have had some form of that, whether or not you got hit in the head, whether or not a high fever, whether or not alcohol poisoning wipes out or didn't allow something to encode, or maybe it was encoded, but the chemical or physical damage wiped it out. Anterograde amnesia is rare and fascinating. Science likes to study the rare. It's involved in the hippocampus. And the two kind of big ones we've studied are Clive Wearing, the British gentleman who had his hippocampus affected by a very high fever brought on by a virus, and HM, Henry Molaison, his hippocampus was damaged during surgery. And as a result, they cannot encode anything new. The video we've seen, or I might have shown you a little bit on Clive Wearing, was every moment of his life is the first moment of his life. Every person he's seen is the first person he's ever seen. That's wild. He's stuck in a perpetual this instant. And as soon as he gets distracted, he comes back, oh my God, I'm alive. Because he can't remember ever having a thought. That is crazy. It is extremely rare, but we like to study the rare because it gives us an insight into how we think. And it comes down to hippocampus, hippocampus, hippocampus. There's a couple other types of amnesia. Infantile amnesia, can't really remember anything before age 5. Freud said that was because of repression. And childhood is awful, it's traumatic. No one wants to remember breastfeeding, no one wants to remember potty training. And if you do, you got problems. Run, do not walk to a therapist. But maybe it's because the brain's not mature enough. The brain hasn't developed enough to encode long term. And if you think you remember something before age 5, you probably remember a video, a snapshot, a story of someone telling you about what happened when you were 3 years old. Next one's called psychogenic amnesia. Psychogenic, look at the word psychogenic. Psycho mind, genic means beginning. Beat it. Dumber because the cow's pretty dumb unless you teach the cow calculus. You know what I'm saying? But the reality is this. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. So you're going to discriminate against zombies. I thought we taught you better. You're racist, aren't you? Let's shun her for her hateful ways.